Matrix Home Solutions Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Good news. I was just mentioning yesterday how I miss hearing from Tony Science.
Oh, yeah, but he's back.
Tony Science. Oh, Fauci. Right.
Fauci.
Yeah. Man of science, not just the man of science. The man who is science.
He's God.
He was on with Jake Tapper yesterday talking about what we were talking about yesterday with Dr. Marty Makary about Omicron Part 2, the reckoning. This
BA2
new variant, and cases are increasing in some Western European countries as well as China.
and Africa now.
And Tony Science went on with Tapper to say, eternal vigilance, and we have to be prepared to go back to where we were 5 minutes ago in the event I say so.
And the caveat is we need to be flexible. And if, in fact, we do see a turnaround and a resurgence, we have to be able to pivot and go back to any degree of mitigation that is commensurate with what the situation is. So we can't just say we're done. Now we're going to move on. We've got to be able to be flexible because we're dealing with a dynamic situation. Hopefully, the cases will continue to come down as the weather gets warmer. The risk of being indoor is less, and we'll do well, at least for the coming several months. But the one thing that's important, that's a wild card in this, is that there is waning immunity. And we got to make sure that those people who've been vaccinated get boosted.
Of course. Put your mask on and get your shot.
Yeah, shut up, put your mask on, get the jab.
If only we didn't stop paying attention to him, maybe he wouldn't be punishing us.
Yeah.
We need to pay attention to Tony Fauci. We need him on the talk shows, even if he's just repeating the same lines that he's been repeating for the better part of 2 years. Just keep him in the public eye, and then he won't punish us.
Mm-hmm.
Make him stop.
Please.
For more on this, but by the way, just as an aside, before we get to our guest, I mean, not that this is important to the COVIDians, like those that are in charge of all the big cities in America, like the District of Columbia. New study, and this is the Amazon Post reporting. New study finds the literacy proficiency gap between young white students and students of color in D.C. continued to widen during the second year of the pandemic. Yeah. First of all, the schools are terrible to begin with.
And just exacerbated it.
And then they get worse across the board, but particularly for minority students. 28% of black students, 30% of Hispanics considered proficient in reading in the fall of 2021 as compared to 70% of whites. I'd love to see what the proficiency standard is. I'm not sure I even believe those numbers, as bad as they are. That gap between white and black and Hispanic expanded over the last 2 years of largely remote learning. But hey, Tony Fauci says we got to go back to the previous mitigations, then that's the end of the conversation. For more on this conversation, pleased to be joined by Batya Ungar-Sargon. She's the deputy opinion editor at Newsweek, author of Bad News: How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. Batya, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so, we continue to find out as more studies are done that despite what our betters told us, it turns out we actually weren't all in this together.
Oh, man, it is so infuriating. It is so infuriating because, of course, it was so obvious that the racial gap in education was growing and that the most vulnerable, be it black children, black students, be it small businesses, right, be it essential workers, were paying the price for the vanity morals of an elite that wanted to stay home and keep everything locked down. It was so clear at the time that it was happening, and yet, like you say, our betters, the elites, kept pushing this as some sort of moral virtue to hurt the most vulnerable. And they did not stop, and they're still not stopping. And, this is not actually even a blue-red distinction. There's a new study that came out that was quoted actually in the New York Times this morning that found that people who are very liberal, they think that COVID still poses, 47% think COVID still poses a big risk, as opposed to people who are just liberal, who only 22% believe that COVID still poses a big risk. What is very liberal? What's the difference between very liberal and liberal? It's not ideology, it's class, it's income, it's education. These are the people with 2 degrees from fancy universities who make over $150,000 a year. They're in the top 10%. They lord it over all of us. And with COVID, with lockdowns, with Hunter Biden's laptop, they lie to us. They censor what normal, ordinary Americans across the political spectrum know to be true. And then when it comes out that they're wrong, they change the subject.
Yeah, that's how I love it. Right. When the truth comes out, the elites change the subject. But do you think since they've dug in their heels so much that they're actually believing the lie? Because it's hard to convince people that they've been fooled for 2.5 years now.
So again, to me, the most interesting distinction is between the 47%, the very liberal 47%, which, by the way, only represent 10%, 6 to 10% of Americans, right? Those progressives, those very liberals. They are the ones who, overwhelmingly control the media. They are overwhelmingly represented in politics and in the staffers of our politicians, importantly. They are the ones who are totally dug in. But liberals, people who are slightly liberal, people who are moderately, and of course people who are conservative, I think these people understand what happened. They understand the lies that they were told, and they're coming out of it. So I'm actually really impressed by the numbers from people who identify as liberal. Only 22% of them still believe COVID presents a real risk, and I think that we're starting to see a backlash against these overeducated, affluent elites who have been just lying and lying. I mean, sometimes it's not lies. Sometimes they truly believe their nonsense, But now it comes out, right? Yesterday, the New York Times said, oh, yeah, maybe there's something in this Hunter Biden laptop story. Okay, now what I want is an accounting from you about how you got it so wrong, right? No, that will never happen. Change the subject. Obsess over Ukraine, right?
Yeah, well, I mean, they'd be in real trouble if everybody got together and said, the real problem, it seems to us, is white, rich leftists. Right. And if everybody sort of understood who was running these scams, they actually look to who's in charge of these institutions that they pay so much attention to and the work product that comes from these institutions that is so influential. Boy, they'd have a real problem on their hands, which is sort of what happened in 2016. And I think that threat there is still very real for them and maybe becoming more real and more urgent with each passing day, as you say, as more people take off their COVIDian masks, both literally and metaphorically.
Yeah, you can really see that the Biden administration has been, when it comes to COVID policy at least, has been catering very much to that very liberal segment, which represents, like I said, 6 to 10% of Americans. There is very much that sense of leaning into that base, leaning into the donor base, leaning into the people who are funding the Democratic Party, as opposed to the vast majority of people who even vote for Democrats. Of course, you have the same problem on the right. Everybody has that. There's that gap between what the voters want and what the donors want. But I think that when you think about like how that gap exists on both sides, whichever side wakes up and says, look, we're not catering to money anymore. We're catering to voters. We're catering to the working class. We realize that there's a wisdom in the working class, right? There's a wisdom in the essential workers who had to brave the pandemic. We're not going to lecture at them. We're going to listen to them. That whoever gets there first is going to have really a lock on a massive, massive constituency. And I think that there's a morality to that too. We should be listening to the working class. We should be giving them a seat at the table. We should be letting them drive our policy.
And the other thing from the right that we need to be wary of, in my view, do not treat people as mascots. That's just categorical. Don't treat people as mascots. I'm not here to save you from yourself. I'm here to say we're going to fight this fight and you're a part of it. And you know what? Being a part of it, you have some responsibilities too, because you've fallen for the scams from public sector unions or from these elites and what they tell you about where your kids should be going to school and what they should be learning in quotation marks and all of these other things that you go along with, and you can't go along with it anymore. You've been part of the problem too. It's not just talking down. I'm coming to save the white working class, or to save the working class, or to save black kids on the south or west sides of Chicago. Hey, I'm coming with an idea. I'm coming with a perspective. This is a fight that we should fight, but you're joining me as an equal partner, and that means we both have responsibilities.
I love that so much, because I think that one of the main difference between the elites and working class, middle class Americans is the question of autonomy, which is exactly what you're describing, which is the view that you have both privileges and rights, but also responsibilities to yourself, to your family, to your community, and to your nation. I think that view is very, very foreign to, the very liberal, progressive, COVID zero set who believe that the government should take all of the power and all of the control and dictate to us from above, and that journalists should have a lot of power to dictate to us what to believe. So I really love what you're saying about coming to people and saying, look, I have an idea, but you have responsibilities as well to your community, and let's work together to elevate your community and your community's needs and to help everybody get the American dream.
How crazy do you think people are going to become with this new variant, BA2?
I think people are done. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think that they're, because I go to these press conferences and people, from WTTW and from the Tribune are like, why are we celebrating? Why are we unmasking? People in China, there's millions of people locked down. Well, they have a zero COVID policy, and we don't have that here in Illinois. But I don't know what kind of appetite there's going to be to put masks back on. Do you?
I really think there's going to be very little. I mean, I'll admit here, I've never been big on that. I've rid the subway without wearing a mask for a long time now, but increasingly I'm seeing my fellow passengers also sort of saying, all right, enough with this. And we're in New York, right? So, a very blue state, blue city at least. I do think that these numbers, especially from this morning, only 22% of liberals and 18% of people who are slightly liberal still believe COVID poses, a big risk to their health. So, those are really, really heartening numbers. And I really hope that we're sort of at the end of this.
What about Ukraine and how we're talking about supporting Ukraine, and Steny Hoyer saying we're at war, and John Kennedy on the other side, Senator Kennedy, saying that Zelensky is the free leader of the free world. He's the real leader of the free world now. And, and then all of this, canceling Russian vodka and Russian mustards and Russian opera singers and so on that have nothing to do with anything except that they happen to be Russian. Do you see a bit of a madness of crowds at play here with the discussion of Ukraine and Russia that we saw at play with COVID?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the difference being that, that war is at stake when you turn on Fox News and you turn on CNN, and there's no difference between them. That was true during the withdrawal from Afghanistan, and it's true now as well, where the journalist set is sort of very much in league with a lot of the, the sort of political elites. And the foreign policy, think tank blob, right, where they just want war, and there's a lot of push for escalation. And it's difficult in this case, as in many cases, because the other side is so evil. I mean, Putin is so terrible. He's a real murderer, a thug. He imprisons the opposition. There's no LGBTQ rights there. There's no freedom of the press. I mean, Russia's hardly a democracy. But at the same time, does that mean that we are at war with Russia? No. I mean, we are not at war with Russia. We represent democracy. We believe in democracy. That is the side we're on. Right now, we are supporting Ukraine's sovereignty, because sovereignty is extremely important, one of the most important values. It's the only way you have civil rights, which is what this great nation was founded on. But we are not at war with Russia. For us to be at war with Russia would be to engage in a nuclear war. And I actually think that the administration has shown a lot of strength in standing up to the demands for a no-fly zone, which would essentially be a demand for going to nuclear war with Russia, because you have a Russian leader who has 6,500 nukes, right? That the minute we go to war with them, it's game over. We are not in World War III. Our job is to make sure we do not enter World War III. And I completely agree with you that the same sort of lockstep step pressure to agree with everybody dancing to exactly the same tune, has taken over because it is in the elite's interest to go to war, even though I think that it is not even in the Ukrainians' interest for us to engage in this war. Whatever President Zelensky says, however brave he is, it's in his interest to try to get us into that war, and it is very much in our interest and in the interest of Ukrainian civilians who are being shelled to put an end to this war as soon as possible, which means to pay attention to the very successful negotiation efforts that have been happening, but that have been completely blackballed. There's no coverage of it in the media, and I mean no coverage. I mean, here and there you'll get an article about how well negotiations are going, but nobody wants to talk about that when that's really all we should be talking about.
She is Batya Ungar-Sargon, Deputy Opinion Editor at Newsweek, author of Bad News, How Woke Media is Undermining Democracy. Batya, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, you too. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Share it on Facebook or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Folks, when shopping for a home mortgage, how much is great service, low closing costs, and competitive interest rates worth to you? At Townstone Financial, it's priceless. Hi, Barry Sterner, founder of Townstone Financial. Let's hear about the Townstone experience from one of our customers.
My name is Melissa, and I bought my first home with Townstone Financial. It was a lot of personal attention